I am James Bartholomew. I'm the director of the museum, and our guest tonight is a man I first met a year and a half ago in Timisoara, which 2 years ago I had never heard of. And yet what I discovered there when I went to this conference where I met Zsolt was that there was an extraordinary story behind the beginning of the revolt against Ceausescu. And Zsolt was right there, a first-hand witness. There will be a Q&A after this, after I've done an interview, and there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you pass your finger over your mouse, you'll get a thing at the bottom of the screen that says Q&A. So by all means, put in questions whenever you like, and we will come to them at the end of the interview. Zsolt was born in 1968, so in 1989, when these events took place, he was a doubtless an enthusiastic and vigorous 20-year-old, and he went on up subsequently to be a member of the Romanian Parliament, and he was then a lecturer at Partium Christian University, and then head of cabinet at the European Parliament for Laslo, who, as you will hear, is central to this whole story. And he's currently on the board of the Platform of European Memory and Conscience. But before I start talking to Zsolt, I want to show a little video of him, which we made in 2019 at the very place where the whole thing began. As much as you can.
Yeah, this was the place where people gathered together on 15th of December to be witnesses on the illegal removal of Pastor Laslo Tokes, and that's how the Romanian revolution started. So people came here. At that time were less cars than now, so there were more space here, and the flat of the priest was over there, and the office was behind. And first afternoon 150 people came. Then they started to light candles and to sing, and next day more and more people come, and they stopped the tram line over there, and that's how people became to be more and more. And from here, from this square and from this house, the popular uprising started, which was ended in demolishing the wall of silence and to change the communism in Romania into democracy.
Where was tell me about where the Secret Service, the Securitate car was? Where was that?
This house in late 1989 was permanently surveilled. So they had a hidden photographer in that house. As far as I remember, on level 1, they had a rented or occupied room, and they made pictures from there. And on the next side of the road, there was a vehicle, a Skoda S100, and a Securitate agent permanently stayed inside the car, and two other agents, usually two agents, were around. So those who entered and who came out from the door, this door, were asked, "What are you doing? We want to see your ID." He or she was registered, and sometimes they took people to the Securitate to interrogate.
So where was the Skoda? I want to know where exactly it was.
The Skoda was over there, the next corner, and another vehicle was in the last weeks here on that corner.
Right. So I hope that came across to everybody. Getting some feedback. So Zsolt, what was life like in Romania? Let's start at the beginning. We'll try and go chronologically. What was life like in Romania in 1989 in terms of ordinary life and in terms of freedom of speech and things of that sort?
Good afternoon, James, and thank you for your invitation. It's a nice occasion for us to share our thoughts and our experiences. When I've seen the movie, I felt moved a bit, because it is a rare occasion in the life of a human being to be witness in at such a moving event, to be witness to history, in fact, because from that square the revolution started. I was student in Timisoara, and you are right. The communist Romania was a state, a dictatorship, a totalitarian regime, as George Orwell described it in his famous book 1984. So I felt, when I read that book 3 months before the revolution, I felt that I live that book. I'm living in that book. So life was sad. In one word, it was like being in a hole without any possibility to escape, without any stair, any help. And of course, it's even symbolic that the revolution started from a church, because the only thing, the only stable point was the trust of people in a better life, in a future, in their dignity. So I was student, and I felt I was studying buildings engineering. Timisoara was relatively a good city. I mean, in the whole country, food was rationed. I mean, we got portion for each. For example, my family, a family of 4, we got 200 grams of butter per month.
And that's not a lot, is it?
That's not a lot. So our Hungarian relatives and tourists who came to Oradea, as our city is very close to the border, they always bring coffee, cheese, salami, anything what was food, but also shampoo or soap, because even elementary things were missing. Elementary articles were missing from the shops. So there were long queues, and even the bread in some areas of the country, even the bread was on portions, rationed.
Yeah, I remember going through Bucharest in 1982, and that image there, which is up at the moment, of an empty chilled cabinet, was one that I saw in Bucharest.
Yes, that's right. This image is very good because shows that the usual image of a shop, of a food shop, a food store, and in case of a new transport was arriving, then it disappeared in an hour or 2 hours. So those lucky who were eventually walking on the street to get something rare, they were lucky in these terms. But I remember, for example, that I've seen orange when I was 16 first. My mother was able to procure 2 oranges from somebody who wanted to make a nice gesture to her before Christmas. And she was very happy that for Christmas, my brother and myself, we got an orange.
Wow. So tell me about, you've told me in the past about informers. So there would be informers even at the university. So can you tell me, how could you tell who was an informer? Did anybody try to persuade you to become an informer or anything of that sort?
Yes, the communist system and the secret service, the famous Securitate, that was the name of the communist secret service in Romania, they used spies. Usually they paid them or they blackmailed them because most of the people was not willing to cooperate with them. But that's why they surveilled, and if they haunted practically normal civilians. And when they found out with a small illegal thing or something, they immediately tried to capture and to force him to cooperate. First, they signed a declaration that they will report everything which they find and they will air. And then they started to report about people who they know. So
were you approached yourself? Were you approached? Was anybody? Did you detect anybody? Did you suspect anybody?
Yes, of course. In my
that.
class, for example, at the university, we expected 2 or 3 guys that they have relations with the Securitate, and one of them came into my room in the dormitory asking, what kind of books do you have, Zsolt? Because they knew that I am Hungarian, so we were maybe even better surveilled in some terms, because they expected Hungarians to be enemies of the system, especially in late 80s when the Ceausescu's communist system became a nationalistic, chauvinistic one. And this guy came to ask me, what kind of books do you read? I want to see that. And I have innocent books, poems, etc., etc. And I was aware that I should give him a good answer. And I told him that, come on, I'm reading only legal books. I do not make any illegality. And he immediately realized that I am not his man. So the general feeling was the general mistrust. And this was the most suffering thing which affected people, that the trust between people, the communities were strongly affected by the fact that everybody expected the other that he or she could report me at the Securitate.
Okay, so can we move on then to your first meeting with Laslo Tokes? Can you tell me what you were told before meeting him and what your impression was when you did meet him?
Yes. As a Hungarian student, I was trying to find out the community life of the Hungarian students in Timisoara. And I heard about a priest who started to speak out against the system every Sunday at the Mass. And more people came there. And I asked my friends that, do you know the priest? What's going on there? Let's go in a Sunday and see. And one of my colleagues, who was not a spy, who was not an agent of the Securitate, told me that Zsolt is very dangerous to go and to meet Mr. Tokes, because he is speaking freely in order to provoke people, and then he is reporting people to the Securitate. In fact, the Securitate tried to isolate him because they realized that he could bring together people and his message have echo. So they tried to neutralize and to isolate him by this fake information which they spread among the students, that in fact Mr. Tokes is not a revolutionary, but he is an agent. Of course, after the revolution 10 years after, when I asked my files, I found out that I was controlled by the Securitate, by the same officer who controlled Mr. Tokes, and every 2 weeks or every month, he was asked to do a report. What kind of influence have the priests on the students? And luckily I escaped somehow, so I never been interrogated because the relationship with Mr. Tokes. But in 1988, when I was introduced to Mr. Tokes by one of my friends, we had a talk of 30 minutes, and I felt immediately that this priest is right. He is a right person. He is sincere. He could not be an agent because his vision is very clear. What is good and what is bad. So from this point of view, his message every Sunday was impressive and deep, because people and the believers who came in this church every week, they felt that finally somebody have courage to say something. Of course, he always respected legality. He never said that we should fight violently against the system. No, he always remained in the terms of he in fact he was on the limit of legality.
So
but
what
the
sort of thing,
was extremely disturbed.
What sort of thing did he say?
He practically every week he reported what happened with his family. Inside the church, he was a protester. He was a revolutionary, because he always wanted more. And he always claimed that the statute of the church, the Hungarian Protestant church, should be respected. At that time, his bishop was also an agent of the Securitate. It was very usual that the top of a system was captured by the Securitate in order to control the whole institution. It was the same when we talk about education or big factories or a church. They tried to control the head. Now, Mr. Tokes always said something personal, because his family supported him, and every week somebody from his family came, because in 1988 he started to have problems with the Securitate.
Yes, tell us about that. Tell us about what kind of pressure did the Securitate put on him?
I can tell you what happened with us. He invited us, young students, to do a recital. Poems, to be poems, yeah, in the church. That was in 1988, October.
Was this theatrical or more musical?
No, it were just poems.
Poems, okay.
Very, very little music. And the church was full when we presented first time our recital. And he announced that this program, this recital, would be repeated in before Christmas. And the Securitate came in a week or two and suggested us by somebody not to go to the priest and not to repeat for second time the recital. And then we started to think what to do, because that was legal to go and to do a recital. But of course, they started to threaten the students and to isolate the priest. Finally, we decided that we should be stand together with the priest, Mr. Tokes, and we repeated in November the recital. And then our amateur theater was closed as a punishment of this, although we tried to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the existence of the amateur group of students. Then he announced it at the mass during the liturgy, and of course more and more people came, and the Securitate started to threaten him and to threaten people who were helping Mr. Tokes.
So
and
it was an attack on him, wasn't there? At one point there was an attack?
yes, that's
Tell
right.
us about that.
It was a very dubious attack because 3 men in
Balaclavas?
with, yes,
Masks?
covered with mask, with black mask and with black clothes, entered in his house afternoon. I mean, it was not at night, afternoon, and they tried to inscene a robbery, but it was clear a pressure on him, a psychological pressure. His wife was pregnant, and the attackers did not expect it that he will defend his family. So we started to fight, and the one of the attackers was pushed down with a chair, and he was a really good construction man. I mean, he had force, and the attackers entered in panic and they ran away because they did not expect it that Mr. Tokes will start to fight.
Yeah.
And of course, next week, after the prayer, he said that our family was attacked, and we expect the Securitate that we don't know who was that, but probably the Securitate have some relations with this attack, etc. And of course, the Communist Party and the Securitate was extremely disturbed. So they went to the bishop and asked him to remove this priest because this priest is creating problems. And the priest decided, yes, this should be the decision of the church, that we should remove this priest. Having the fact that the church is a Presbyterian church, the Presbyterium stand together and continued to support his priest.
When you
And
say
the
the
Presbyterium
Presbyterian,
said,
you mean the congregation, is that right?
the congregation, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry for this.
Right.
The congregation said, no, we do not allow our priest to be removed. So we stand with him, and we continue to modernize and to build up the church because there were constructions in the church. In 1989, in the summer, the first victim of their resistance was found dead in the forest, probably killed by the Securitate. His name is Ernő Újvárosi. His death is not investigated fully, not even now. So the community supposed that he was tortured, interrogated, tortured, and then killed by the Securitate because he was the engineer who helped a lot the congregation and the priest. That was in July 1989. And the second part of 89 was really hard because Mr. Tokes was under house arrest. So he was not allowed to go out from his church and from his house. The church was on the first level. He stayed on the ground floor, and to do the mass, to do the service every Sunday, he was not obliged to leave the building. So the Securitate placed the surveilling cars and the surveilling agents in the front of the house, and he and his family were surveilled 24 hours per day.
Yeah, and then there was the interview, the Canadian interview. Can you tell us about that? What happened?
Yes, they knew that the whole house is bugged, and two courageous Canadian journalists managed to send a cameraman and the reporter to Mr. Tokes, and they went up to the place where the core is staying.
The gallery where the choir is.
The gallery, exactly, because the gallery was not bugged. Everywhere in the church and in the house, the Securitate managed to place microphones. So the whole space was bugged, but not the gallery.
Yeah, so the picture we're seeing now is the picture of the main body of the church. The gallery is literally above where we are where the camera is situated, and is also made of wood in a very similar style.
Exactly. And somehow, with a little luck, they managed to take the interview out, and it was broadcasted in Canada, and later on also in Hungary.
Now, the significance of the Hungarian broadcast is that it could be heard in the area of Romania, close to the Hungarian border. Is that right?
Exactly. That was very important, because in Hungary, the perestroika and the glasnost, the process of softening the communist system, started several years ago before. So when Romania reached in '89 the hardest point of the communist regime, then Hungary, in contrast with this, they opened the system. So more and more free interviews were allowed by the party and the censorship in the TV. And also this interview, luckily, was broadcasted by Alajos Krudinak in the famous Panorama program, which was the program of the Foreign Affairs news in the Hungarian.
So people in Romania actually, some of them could see this interview and could see that he was saying these things.
Yes, me myself, I've seen that, and it was shocking for me that I was student in Timisoara. Every Sunday I was in the church, but I have no clue about this interview. And this was right, because of course it should be kept in secret. Otherwise, the whole interview and the transport of the cassette,
it was secretly taken out of the country. The cassette was secretly
taken out, of course. At that time, there was no internet.
And then presumably the Securitate was even more determined to get rid of Mr. Tokes. And so that led to him being told, right, you will be leaving, and you will definitely be leaving, and on this particular date, on the, what was it, the 15th of December.
Yes, that's right. Mr. Tokes was announced by his bishop that the police will come to evacuate him by force. And he said that this evacuation is illegal because the congregation choose the priest, and the priest wants to stay. So the bishop had no right to remove his priest. And he asked the congregation and the believers and those who were in the church to come and to be witness of this illegal evacuation. And we went there on the 15th in order to be witnesses. Of course, we, at the first moment, there were only 50, then 100, then 150. And we started to sing religious songs like Te benned bíztunk elejétől fogva, we trusted you from the very first moment, God, etc., etc. And next day, Also,
Did the
Romanian
Securitate come? The Securitate came or not?
yes, of course, they were there.
Okay.
But I think when they've seen that
The crowd.
community gathered together,
Hmm.
they decided to wait.
Yeah.
They decided to wait because they wanted to resolve this issue at the first moment, not by force, but smoothly.
Yeah, quietly. And so the next day, the crowd came again. Is that right?
Yes, and also overnight, especially the elder people stayed there with a candle in their hand. So practically the church and the house of the priest was guarded by the congregation and by the believers by candles, protesting practically against the illegal evacuation. Next day, the Romanian believers came, first the Baptists, and then also other Romanian believers, and the people started to be more and more. Of course, we've seen the Securitate agents, so they surveilled the building always, and they had civilians, of course, not in the uniform. In fact, there were no policemen there, only the Secret Service agents disguised in civilians. And on the 16th afternoon, somebody stopped the tram, which is very close, like 50 meters at the corner. And from the tram, everybody came there asking what's going on here. And the people started to be more and more and more. So that's how...
Can we have the tram picture? I think we got a picture of the tram that was, I think it was taken by the Securitate themselves.
Yes.
I hope it'll come up in a moment. Yeah, the tram was stopped, yes.
Yes, and when we were around 1,000, 1,500, it's very difficult to estimate. Yeah, and a lot of trams. You see this very old communist style trams at that time, and this picture was taken from a building. As you see, it's not from the level of the people, it's from a building from the up. And somebody stopped the first tram, then the second tram, etc., etc. And somebody went on the tram and made a short speech. And I remember exactly what he was saying. He said that in Czechoslovakia, in Hungary, in Poland, in East Germany, there is an open process. They started to open the system. Why not in Romania? So we want heating in our houses. We want bread. We want human dignity. At the first moment, nobody said down with the communism or down with the dictatorship in the first moment, because in '87 there was a riot in Brasov where the workers protested against the unhuman conditions, and later on many of them were interrogated and killed. So, and people knew that. So at the first moment, this was the message. At a certain point in the afternoon, at around, let's say 6:30 afternoon, somebody said, let's go to the party headquarters.
But hang on, before you go to that, but before you go there, Zsolt, wasn't there some more singing again? Was there not singing of the Romanian?
Yes. The song Deșteaptă-te Române, Wake Up Romanians, which was a forbidden song, some small groups started to sing that song. Sincerely, I haven't heard that song before because it was forbidden. My family or my friends did not told me, so I realized later on that it was Deșteaptă-te Române, which is actually the official hymn of Romania. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so that's great.
Yes.
So then you had the Romanian anthem, or what became the Romanian anthem, and then after that you said, you were saying, someone said, did anybody say down with Ceausescu at that point or not?
No, no. When the first crowd started from Maria Square, from the church,
This is on the 16th, isn't it? On the 16th
Yes.
of December, yeah.
To the party headquarters, there is a walk of, let's say, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Nobody sat down with Ceausescu. I remember clearly that they said unitate, unity. They said fără violență, no violence. Yeah, this is the building of the party headquarters. And at a certain point, the crowd started to say Gorbachev, Gorbachev. So even Gorbachev, the last Secretary General of the Soviet Communist Party, was a positive personality compared with Ceausescu. And when we arrived here in the front of the building, we were hundreds. I mean, maybe 600, 700 people, 1,000. And some courageous men entered in the building and started to throw out the books about Ceausescu and the communist books about the ideology, the communist ideology. And in half an hour, maybe 40 minutes, a special unit arrived and they guarded the front of the building, and they started to apply the tear gas against us. But before that, a big vehicle, fireworker vehicle came, which was attacked by the crowd. And the soldier was taken out, but not beaten. Because even when the soldier entered in panic and making the vehicle to go back, and he hit a tree, and the car stopped, and the people gathered there, attacked the car, the vehicle, and they took out the driver. But they did not beat the driver because he was a simple soldier. But in half an hour, 40 minutes, the special unit in black clothes and white hats with special protective plexiglass arrived, and they started to hit us, to beat us, and they applied the tear gas. And many of my colleagues, student colleagues, were arrested, and they were transported to the Securitate, interrogated, beaten, and the Securitate had a very clear intention to force these people to sign a declaration that they are paid by the Hungarian Secret Service, and in fact they are not real Romanians, but they are agents of countries which are Romania's enemies, which of course was false. So most of them refused. But I have a friend, Mr. Árpád Gazda, who was taken next day in the morning together with Mr. Tokes and his family from the church. And Mr. Gazda stayed 3 days in the Securitate cells. He was beaten for 3 days, and he was tried to be forced to sign a declaration that he is a Hungarian spy. And he said, no, I'm a student, and I've been there because I think that we desire a better life. And he was beaten, and luckily he survived, and he is now a journalist, a very good journalist. But that's how democracy began for him.
Yeah. And meanwhile, and in fact, because I've interviewed Árpád, and he was in the church when when Mr. Tokes was arrested. He was arrested right in front of the altar, and Arpad noticed that as he was taken out, there was blood on his head, and Tokes was then taken. Now, tell us about where he was taken.
Yes, he was taken in a car. He was separated from his wife, who was pregnant in the 7th month. And first he thought that he will be transported to the border at the forest and he will be shot. But when the car started to Arad and then to Nagyvárad, Oradea, and then to Sălaj, to Mineu, he realized that in fact the scenario was to transport him to Mineu, to the small village where his bishop tried to move him by force, and he refused. And they transported him and his wife to Mineu. He was interrogated for 2 days. He was not beaten. Later, he found out that he was not beaten because Ceausescu wanted to force him or to convince him to stand in the front of the camera and to say that I believe that communist is nice and I support Ceausescu. So this was the plan. That's why he was not beaten on his face, to prove that everything is fine, and he turned to support the communists. And luckily, the revolution in Timisoara started, because after the news, when Mr. Tokes was transported, more and more students and more workers came out to the street. So on the 17th, yes, on the 17th and on the, I think this is later than 17th, because in the 17th, let's say 1/3 of this crowd was here on this square. This is the main square of Temesvár, in the front of the opera, the famous opera square. We were surveilled by a helicopter, a chopper, and on the 17th, I've seen the first man shot on his shoulder. He was shot. I stayed in the front of the opera, somewhere like 50 meters in the front of the opera, and he was coming from a small street held by somebody, and he was helped to a car, which car bring him to the hospital. Right. And then the tanks arrived to Timisoara. It was terrible. The terrible fact was on the 16th, let's return for a day, when we returned to the dormitory, to the student campus, and I went inside the campus and I tried to explain to my colleagues what happened. And it was a terrible sign. I was very enthusiastic that, come on guys, now it's happening something. This is a chance. Now it's time to go on the street. Let's go. And they were like 10, 12 colleagues, but good colleagues who know me, who knew me before. And nobody trusted me. So the whole thing was so unreal that even those colleagues who were living in Temesvár, they did not trust me. Only 2 or 3 hours later, when more and more reports came that the crowd first started. So on the 17th and the 18th, the tanks arrived from Lipova, because from Bucharest there were clear orders that they should start to shoot the people. And the fights on the streets started when people stayed in the front of the tanks and they claimed democracy. They said freedom, freedom, etc. And the soldiers had the order to shoot. More and more deaths, of course, was reported. sincerely, I was aware that having a connection with Mr. Tokes, I am in danger. So I went home fast. I made my bags and I moved to the house of one of my friends. I stayed there 3 days. But all the night we heard the guns, especially the heavy guns, were really noisy. And it was a terrible stress because from a peaceful, normal life to have guns, tanks, and armed vehicles. And the most terrible thing was that we listened to the radio, and for more than a day, there were no news about the fact that people are dying in Timisoara. Then Radio Free Europe, the BBC and the Hungarian media also reported that there were riots. I think this is the word what they used on the streets of Timisoara, and some deaths were reported. But the first news was very foggy because nobody had direct information, of course. Mm-hmm. And for us, the most terrible thing was that we cannot send a message. What's happening here? That people are dying here for freedom, and we could not send a message.
But the news got out eventually, and then
yes.
And then perhaps we could jump to the famous moment when Ceausescu was giving his speech, and then realized that people were shouting, and I believe that one of the things that they were shouting was Timisoara.
Yes.
And that they recognized that as a place where, you know, the revolution was beginning, and he couldn't understand what was happening. And there's a very often seen video of Ceausescu standing there and, you know, giving his boring speech about how marvelous socialism was, and then realizing that the crowd was shouting and things were happening which were not under his control. And there he is with his hands up with, you know, saying, "Stop, what are you doing?" And Timisoara was one of the things, at least, that the crowd was shouting.
Exactly, because Timisoara was the symbol of resistance, the symbol of fight against communism. And Timisoara became the first free city in Romania after the commander of the tank unit refused to apply the orders. So that was the moment when a part of the officers turned on the side of the people and refused to kill innocent people, unarmed innocent people. So from psychological point of view, these officers, these brave officers, risked their lives, because in case of, in a few days, they would be dead. In case of Ceausescu was able to start a civil war, then the whole team of the officers would be dead, of course, because it was an emergency situation. It was declared like in the war, and the order was clear that they should kill the Hungarian agents. I met 2 years ago the commander of the tank unit, and he said that from Bucharest they got the orders that they should kill the Hungarian agents who came for diversion. And he convoked the officers and he said, there is no foreign spy on the streets, only our people, our fathers, our mothers, our brothers. So it's our nation. We refuse to kill them. So that was the point when the army turned, and people started to say very loud, "Armata e cu noi," the army is with us, the army is with us. From psychological point of view, it was that was the moment when they realized that the freedom could be achieved. So we were on the street and we cried. So it was frenetic. It was fantastic, that feeling.
And if we could, oh, there's a picture of people celebrating on the having got hold of a tank. But can we perhaps jump back to what was happening to Laslo Turkish, the man who was at the beginning of all this, and what was he? I mean, I interviewed Mr. Turkish 2 years ago, and I remember he said that the Securitate agents, here he was in Miniu, and the security agent said to him, you know, we're going to have to torture you, and more or less tomorrow your torture begins. And then the next day, instead of torturing him, he was invited to lunch.
Yes.
This is a picture of him after he'd been told, you know, we're not going to torture you.
Exactly.
He told me this is an army man, not a Securitate man.
Yes.
And
this army man
happened was that they realized that the situation was changing rather dramatically.
Yes, exactly. And it is clear that an important part of the Securitate turned his face from Ceausescu to Iliescu. And this is why some analysts are criticizing the whole procedure, because from Timisoara, the revolution which was started, it was an anti-communist revolution and anti-Securitate revolution. In Bucharest, of course, there were fights, and the new power, the second liners of the former Communist Party, Mr. Ion Iliescu and the others, they took the power, and they knew how to turn also the Securitate. I mean, that's why not even now we don't know who were the terrorists, because Mr. Iliescu and the others said that we should fight the terrorists. And we don't know who were the terrorists and why, after Iliescu and the others took the power, more than 1,000 people died after Ceausescu was killed, and practically in the country there were fights, but who fought? In fact, some units of the Securitate with other units of the army. So very dubious things happened, and it is not exaggerated to say that the new power could be accused by crimes against humanity. So those organizations who represent the revolutionaries, they claim year by year the documents to be opened, the journal of the army, the command journal of the army. One of the leaders of the revolutionaries made a hunger strike for more than 100 days. He almost died just to find out the truth. So the truth is not found out, not even now. And many of the analysts are saying that the second line communists took the power. That's why they steal the revolution.
Yep. Now I'm going to take some of the questions now. We've got a few questions that are up, and one of them is rather on this point. From Andrew, have the major communist criminals been brought to justice? If not, why not? And where are they now?
That's a good question. Very few. I mean, after the revolution, the new government, they made a process of the officers, but it was just to mislead the people. So in fact, for those crimes, nobody was punished, and the trial of communism did not happen. After 30 years, we could say that very few leaders were punished. 2 or 3 directors of former communist penitentiaries, jails, were sentenced. Of course, they are old people, and the process of the communism did not happen nor in Romania and not in Central East Europe. So we could not say after the Nuremberg trial, because the 20th century was hit by two totalitarian dictatorships, Nazism and communism. And communism produced much more victims than the Second World War and the Nazism together. And the communism continues to produce victims in many parts of the world. But if we call Europe as a democracy, it's our obligation, moral and human obligation, to make the same trial and to use the same scale when we judge Nazism and communism. So in Romania did not happen this, and that's why many people are disappointed, because the old leaders reconverted their power. The old Securitate leaders became good, situated and rich capitalists, influential media moguls, and they reconverted their network into another capital, financial and media capital, in the so-called democracy.
Yeah.
So that's why.
So we should say, of course, that Ceausescu himself and his wife were both went through some kind of rather peremptory trial and were shot.
Yes, that's right. They were shot. They claimed that they are not judged correctly. It is clear that if they would not be shot, there would be more deaths and more fights, because the faithful part of the Securitate, after their execution, the faithful part of the Securitate realized that this is the end, so better to turn and support the new power, and that's what happened, in fact.
And now I've got a question from Doug Shaw saying, at what point did you lose your fear of the state?
Sorry, I'm not sure
At what point, Zsolt, did you personally lose your fear of the Securitate, of the state? At what point did you lose your fear? Did you stop?
I understand. It was a process, because first, when I went to meet Mr. Tokes, I realized that somehow this could be risky. Then when he invited us to do the recital, and then to go again to the recital, my parents told me, once I come home and I explained what's going on, and they told me that, Zsolt, you better finish the university, because you risk your diploma. And it was true, because in '89 they started to cut. There were a few lecturers who did not allow us, even our presentation was good. So we realized that we are surveilled and we should stand consequently. So I think it was a process, but it is clear that I lost my fear when I've seen that people gather together, and I heard 1,000 people to say libertate. It's a terrible force, that you are not alone. It's a terrible force.
Is there, Andrew asks, is there any figure of the number of murders under the Ceausescu regime since it began, and indeed under communism in Romania from the beginning to the end? Is there any estimate of the number of people who were killed under communism in Romania?
That's a good question. I mean, during the revolution, the number of killings, officially, it's about 1,400, as far as I remember, but I'm not sure about that. Maybe less a bit, but more than 1,000, it is clear. In Romania, as far as I know, the number is 100,000. So the estimation is more than million, because after 45, it is estimated that all families had somebody to suffer during the communism. Do not forget that, for example, after the Second World War, they deported all families from the Banat having German origins just because they are Germans. They were moved by the communists exactly like the Jews were moved to Auschwitz. They were moved from Banat to Baragan, not in camps, not in extermination camps, it is right, but they were forced to live in the Baragan, thousands. I mean, victims after the revolution of 56, there were more sentences in Romania than in Hungary, death sentences. So I should ask maybe my friend Marius Oprea, who is called the archaeologist of the communism and the Securitate, because he knows better. Or I strongly recommend to read the Black Book of Stéphane Courtois, because
Black Book of Communism.
The Black Book of Communism, exactly, because he's trying to make some estimations. But the murder, the scale of the murder and of torture in Romania, as in also in other societies, were on the scale of millions.
Yeah. Okay. So another question is, was it fortunate that Mr. Tokes made his objections and angered the Securitate at that particular moment? In other words, if he had made those preached 10 years before, would he have been just shot and killed? Was it, I mean, there must have been other people who objected to the regime who did not start a revolution, but who died. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Was it, you know, I mean, he could have been shot, couldn't he?
Yes, there are martyrs among the priests, the Protestant or Roman Catholic priests or Greek Catholic priests. So there are many political killings before that, but the protest of Mr. Tokes was in time, it was not a singular moment. He started to protest years before. That's why he was removed first from Brașov to Dej, and then in Brașov, in fact, he was fired, and then he protested that he had the right to serve his community, and then he was in Dej, and then moved to Timisoara, which was considered a weak Protestant community, and he was moved there as a second priest. But the first priest died in a year after he arrived, Mr. Priest Otto Pajker. In this very lucky circumstances, practically, he became the first priest, and he brought up the community, and the community stand with him. But his protest was in time was a procedure for more than 3-4 years.
Yeah. Okay, there's a question here from Neil Petrie saying, I'll read it out, but I think that you will find out, you will only find out what really happened when you have direct democracy in which people control the political parties. Is there any prospect of such a system, such as the Swiss have? And is, well, I suppose, yeah, I'll leave that with you.
Yeah, I admire the Swiss democracy, sincerely, because in many fields, they exercise the direct democracy, for in small villages, in the cantons. And for us, for Hungarians living in Transylvania, Switzerland is also an example, best practice example, as 4 different ethnic groups are able to live together, to manage their ethnic diversity together, and to practice democracy, and not to rule one nation over another. The French, the German, the Italian, and the Ladin ethnic group is able to manage a wonderful country. So that's what we want in Transylvania and in Romania. We hope that Romania will stop to be a highly centralized country, but the regions will have more power, such as the example of Switzerland.
Some people have said that the whole revolution was managed by elements of the Securitate, or sometimes some others say that the CIA was involved. What do you think? What's your view of this?
There are many theories. I think Ceausescu and his system was very uncomfortable for the Soviets, for the Americans, for the Europeans, because Ceausescu turned communism into the North Korean style. And of course, Ceausescu had many enemies. But what started in Timisoara was a revolt of a people, was a true revolution of minds, revolution of thought, the revolution of soul, and the revolution of faith, because we supported a priest who, helped by God, trusted by God, finally started the whole thing. Of course, when the revolution arrived in Bucharest, there were many forces trying to influence the new power. And there is a famous movie that when they occupied the TV building, somebody is asking Mr. Iliescu, and now what we are doing? And Mr. Iliescu is saying, what? We are going to the Soviet embassy and we present ourselves who we are. It's on the YouTube. I mean, everybody can see this. So there were many forces interested to change Romania. What is true that people went out to the street in order to change the system. And this is the revolution. I mean, when people uniting themselves are ready to die for freedom and are ready to change a dictatorship, a communist dictatorship, into freedom. So this was a real revolution from this point of view. Of course, a few days later in Bucharest, when they started to arrange the new power and to reorganize the cards, etc., there were many forces to influence. But what we see in Timisoara and what happened in many cities and in Bucharest was a revolution.
Yeah. One last question. Andrew follows up by asking, is there any movement or pressure in Romania to bring these people, he means these communists, to trial in the same way that Nazi criminals were prosecuted? Is there any chance that this may happen, or is there any movement to try to make this happen?
I think it is a question of political will, because there is no matter what color of the government is, but the process of the revolution does not forwarding. We do not see any steps forward. There is a clear charge against Ion Iliescu, and year by year, the Romanian justice system is accepting to postpone and to delay. So his trial is delayed. He is very old, of course. He is very old, but just read the declarations and the statements of the organizations representing the revolutionaries who are alive and who are living without a leg or without an arm or with a bullet in their body. They are human tragedies, and they should not be convinced by any power that those who could be charged should not be charged from political reasons, by political reasons. So the trial of communism is the trial of the revolution in Romania, yes. Because the second liners, the communist second liners, took the power in 89 December and in 1990, and they are defending themselves. So I hope that soon or later, but I hope soon, this process will start.
Yeah. Okay, Zsolt. Well, I think that's probably where we should stop. Thank you very much indeed for a brilliantly lucid description of what happened. It is an amazing story that one priest can begin a revolution just by talking, and then crystallize the feelings of thousands of people, in fact millions of people throughout Romania, that regime had been a disaster. I should mention before we go that please to see our website if you haven't seen it already, where you can, that leads you to lots of things that we have done and may be of interest. Please do subscribe on the website for updates and to know about any future events. And you might even want to go to the donate button to help finance us to develop and expand our mission, which is to tell the true history of what happened under communism. So for the time being, thank you very much, Zsolt. Thank you for those people who have attended, and have a very good night to you.
Thank you. You too.